Cindy is with the Congregational Church on Spain Street, and they have a butterfly garden there, and we're going to talk about monarch butterflies.
Yes, thank you very much, Ken and everyone. The Monarch Pollinator Garden is a project that's in collaboration with three principals. The First Congregational Church, as you said, it's here locally on 252 West Spain Street.
And Shir Shalom as well.
Yes, and Shir Shalom, and it's part of the Earth Care Committee there. It's also in collaboration with the Valley of the Moon Garden Club and the California State Parks Vallejo home property. And the mission, I'm sure you want to talk about that too.
You go right ahead, sister.
The mission of the Monarch Pollinator Garden is to develop monarch butterfly habitat in Sonoma Valley with benefit to all pollinators. The pollinator.
I'm a pollinator.
Well, good for you. I'm glad to know that.
Yeah.
I think we all are in one capacity or another. The Monarch Pollinator Garden is located directly behind the First Congregational Church, Shir Shalom, on the church property, which is adjacent to the Vallejo home fields. And the objectives are to create a model nectar garden needed by adult butterflies and milkweed habitat needed by caterpillars, which includes food and shelter and water. And we educate and encourage others to plant healthy gardens for pollinators. We are hopeful that we will be able to establish a super highway for pollinators throughout Sonoma Valley. So I'm here today as a representative of the three groups, and I'm interested in sharing the goals of educating the public. And we very much appreciate the opportunity to be here on your radio and share that with your listeners. According to the Xerces Society, the western monarch butterfly is at a fraction of a percent of its historic levels, and we need an all-hands-on-deck approach to support the recovery of these iconic species. Their populations have dropped 99% in the past 2 decades.
Wow. Is that from cell towers?
No.
It's from
Dave, you and I could disagree about cell towers.
No, it's because their habitat has been wiped out gradually by
Cell towers.
civilized people, just building up.
That's right, urbanization.
And particularly the milkweed plant has been wiped out in a lot of places because it's considered just a weed.
That's exactly right. They have faced floods and fires.
Yes.
And as you say, urbanization.
Yes. And it's a
Pesticides.
migratory insect, unlike a lot of others.
Yes.
And where does it typically go after it leaves this area, and where does it come from?
Our western monarchs, which are facing the greatest decline, are here west of the Rocky Mountains. And then we have the eastern monarchs, which are doing a bit, they're faring a bit better. Our western monarchs stay pretty much along the coastline here of California. They go south, almost to Baja, and in some cases they do migrate into Central America along with the eastern butterflies.
It's amazing to consider such a small thing can travel such huge distances.
Yes, almost 4,000 miles.
Yes.
But the problem is they're facing the real possibility of extinction.
Yes.
So that's what we're trying to help prevent. And I want to bring you up to date, if I may, on what we've accomplished in our little pollinator garden these past 2 years now. We broke ground in February 2018, and one of the things that we have done has to enlist the help of our mayor, who signed the National Wildlife Federation's Tri-National Mayor's Monarch Pledge earlier this spring, and that proclaims the city of Sonoma as one of other cities throughout the United States, Canada, and Mexico committed to protecting and providing habitat for monarch butterflies.
Mayor Amy Harrington.
Yes.
We're going to have Mayor Logan Harvey on next week.
Yay. Well, he was instrumental in helping us too. We're very
Good guy.
appreciative of them. So the city of Sonoma pledged to several action items within this pledge to ban harmful herbicides and insecticides, for example, glyphosate, most commonly marketed by Monsanto under the name Roundup. And I'm hopeful that neonicotinoids will be added to this ban in the review process of the City of Sonoma's annual accountability to the action items upheld by the National Wildlife Federation's Mayor's Pledge. The Sonoma City Council pledged to invest in public gardens on behalf of monarchs, and that would specifically be the Sonoma Ecology Center's Sonoma Garden Park on 7th Street East. The mayor's Monarch Pledge commits to educating the public about planting monarch-friendly gardens, and that includes choosing appropriate types of milkweed for our area, the native varieties, I want to stress, native varieties, and choosing appropriate nectaring plants and flowers. So, through these action items, the mayor's pledge also urges the planting of gardens throughout neighborhoods and in school programs, school gardens. So what's good for the monarch butterfly is good for all pollinators. We'll keep that in mind. That's sort of the chorus line. When I look at you, I want you to say what's good for the butterflies is good for all pollinators.
What's good for the butterflies is good for all pollinators.
You got it. The pledge also supports and facilitates native plant sales, milkweed seed collection, and propagation of efforts, all of which are engaged in by both the Monarch Pollinator Garden and the Sonoma Ecology Center's Sonoma Garden Park. So, to achieve the objectives set forth by the collaborators on this project, as well as the action items set forth in the Mayor's Monarch Pledge, we rely primarily on creditable sources of information, and your listeners can go to these sites and get more information. From the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. Xerces is spelled Xerces, xerces.org. They can go to the University of California Department of Natural Resources. They can go to the California Native Plant Society, the Pollinator Posse, and CalFlora, among others. But those are the primary ones we rely on. So back to the history. We broke ground in February 28th. We were able to get eggs from Suzanne Clark, the Butterfly Alliance in Petaluma, and the eggs and caterpillars were raised, butterflies released, with the help of 8 butterfly foster families here in Sonoma. All eggs were successfully released with the exception of those which arrived late in the season. And here's where the problem comes in. They were thought to possibly have been born on non-native milkweed in Petaluma. The late season arrivals were crippled as they emerged from their chrysalises and unable to fly.
Oh, gosh.
So we collaborators subsequently posed 2 hypotheses. One, the idea that the non-native plants were possibly contaminated with the OE parasite. That's Ophriocistis electrocera parasite. A lot easier to say OE. And 2, our hypothesis included, the non-native plants caused the monarchs to hang around too late in the season for them to catch up with migration and were therefore adversely affected by the cooler temperatures arriving late in the season. That was our first year. Last year, we were so hopeful that the monarchs we had the season before would return, but monarchs do not possess a strong homing instinct as, say, the green sea turtles. They don't return to the same place where they were born, but we were hopeful that some would. Nonetheless, based on research, we decided that if we were fortunate to find monarch eggs in our garden this past year, we wouldn't interfere with nature, allowing the butterflies this time to complete their cycles fully unassisted. But, darn, due to some unexpected irrigation complications in our garden, the eggs that graced our garden along with the surviving milkweed plants seemed in need of rescuing and were moved to a makeshift butterfly nursery in the Lath House at the Vallejo home. Eventually, 7 monarchs emerged from the chrysalises. 5 females were released into the garden, but 2 males could not fly. And 11 more remained in their chrysalises until sadly they turned to powder. This was late September, October, and into November. So, was the lateness of their arrival in our garden coupled with the blast of cold weather responsible for these setbacks? Why hadn't they migrated by now? Was it the result of feeding on the non-native tropical milkweed and other non-native milkweeds that was delaying their migration? Yes.
Welcome.
Hey, neighbors.
Hey, neighbor.
You got it. Hey, neighbors.
Hey, neighbors.
You got
Yes.
that right.
So when you left for break, I was pondering what the questions were that we, the collaborators, are faced with, and the last question we're pondering is this: were that butterflies dining on non-native tropical milkweed, which is known to be contaminated with those OE parasites? So we're looking for answers. In the meantime, I do have a real sweet story that I'd like to share
Tell us, sister.
from last summer. From seemingly out of nowhere, one last, late, sluggish, scraggly, and very tiny monarch caterpillar arrived at summer's end and the beginning of fall. Miraculously, it was spotted, as it could easily have been missed. Fortunately, it was ever so gently relocated to the Lath House Butterfly Nursery at the Vallejo home, where a very kind state park employee named the tiny caterpillar Francis Drake. The very kind state park employee decided Francis Drake needed a warmer climate so late in the season. And that is so important to a butterfly's life cycle. So the very kind state park employee and Francis Drake embarked on a journey of discovery together. Francis Drake rode shotgun in the front seat of a VW bus next to the very kind state park employee all the way from Sonoma south to Atascadero, where the caterpillar, now a chrysalis, would surely benefit from warmer temperatures and where he would surely stand a better chance of catching up with migration. Francis Drake and the very kind state park employee checked into the Holiday Inn Express in Atascadero. It wasn't long after that Francis Drake emerged from his chrysalis with strong, voluminous wings, magnificent colors, and striking markings. The hotel even posted Francis Drake's handsome photo to Instagram along with a warm congratulatory note that read, "Welcome, little buddy." The very kind state park employee knew the importance of quickly releasing the fresh new creature, so without wasting a minute, the two of them dashed off to the Monarch Butterfly Grove at Pismo Beach. As the very kind state park employee was saying goodbye to Francis Drake to join the kaleidoscope of other monarchs there, he discovered Francis Drake was Franny Drake after all. So, as the very kind state employee tenderly coaxed her onto his finger and released her into a warm, welcoming new home, the bystanders could hear him say, "Go, Franny, go. I want to credit the Vallejo home employees for successfully raising numerous other butterflies, too, and doing the wonderful job that they do. So, hi. Hi, Susan.
I
I'm
Susan's
so glad
here.
you're
I
here.
saw Franny myself.
Yay.
I was down by the beach and there she was.
Okay,
Yay. Yay.
come pull your chair up to the desk here.
I will.
So, I
Dave,
want
can you
to
help her with the chair?
talk about what your listeners can do.
Yes.
Okay, before that, where are you? Where's your garden located again?
Yes, we are located at 252 West Spain Street, which is on church property of the First Congregational Church.
So do people need to set up
Sonoma.
an appointment to come see it, or can they just stop in?
And we will have tours set up in the coming summer months as we have in the past.
But people can stop by and see it from the outside of the garden,
Well, they
correct?
can. Right now, it's still asleep. It's a little bit sleepy yet, but pretty soon, as the weather starts warming, we will be celebrating planting new plants.
And my
getting
understanding
ready
is
for-
the Thomas fire wiped out a lot of monarch butterfly habitat. Did
the
you?
fires have been unkind to a lot of creatures. Yes.
But
People.
including the butterflies.
Yes, yes, that's all part of the habitat. So, what can your listeners do? And thank you for that question about our tour dates. We will certainly be available, and we will also, at the time, have literature to give them and seedlings for them when they do come to the garden. And the seedlings will be available around the time of Earth Day, which is mid-April. It's actually April 22nd this year. So, based on our passion for helping our monarchs in need of rescue from this apocalyptic decline, we have creditable sources telling us to urge Bay Area communities to plant native narrowleaf milkweed, native showy milkweed, native California milkweed, native Indian. Just stick with native narrowleaf milkweed. If the other names are too difficult to remember, native narrowleaf milkweed for our area.
Where can people get those?
Well, you can ask your local nursery people, but they will also try to offer you the non-natives. And people look at the tropical varieties, the non-natives, and they say, oh, what lovely blooms you have. But those are to the detriment of our monarch populations. They want to stick with natives.
Well, I know there's a native nursery in Point Richmond, and there's also a native nursery in Tamales Bay, the town of Tamales, rather. So that's two possible resources.
Good place to go. And like I say, our garden will have some native milkweed seedlings, and so will the Sonoma Garden Park.
When will they have those?
We have the little seedlings now, but they're not quite big enough. By April, they should be big enough to go into the gardens.
Great.
So if you have non-native milkweeds in your gardens, we're asking that people will please remove them and completely discard any and all tropical or Mexican milkweed. And let your garden sitters know that they shouldn't be selling non-native varieties, because they do. And that's part of our mission, to go out and visit with these nurseries and tell them that we would prefer that they get on board and help with just selling natives. So that's what we can do to help bring back the millions of monarchs that used to wing their way through our valley. Can you even imagine that? 1 million of them flying through this
Absolutely.
flyway? I can't wait for that to happen again. But people also need to plant nectaring plants, flowering plants for the adult butterflies. And remember, what helps the monarchs helps,
Everybody else.
yes, all the other pollinators. Very good.
You know, I was down at, we talked about Esalen earlier. I was down at Esalen once, and they have a couple of trees down there where all the monarchs come to. And I was down there once when the monarchs all landed, were there for like a week. It was just amazing.
Wow, that's powerful. Some flowering plants that people can put in their gardens are lantana, coreopsis, echinacea, buddleia, cosmos, zinnia, verbena, fennel, passion vine, tithonia, sedum, scabiosa, fennel, nasturtium, and the list goes on. They can go to the sites I mentioned earlier. Xerces Society, for instance, is a great link. So let your garden centers know that you will only purchase plants, seeds, and soil not treated with those neonicotinoids, also known as neonics. And we need to seek mandatory labeling on these plants also. And also refuse to use Roundup. Something else you can do is when you are out hiking and you think you spot milkweed or see a butterfly, take a picture and send it to iNaturalist because citizen science is important. And you mentioned butterflies that you saw on the trees and how spectacular it was. When monarchs rest in the mountains of central Mexico, and that's usually for that's a very extended period of time, 4 months, they call that the Methuselah generation. It's only in the winter, and they only drink small amounts of water. But when those butterflies are huddled together in the trees are literally weighed down with perhaps greater than 80 pounds of butterflies per
Wow.
tree. Isn't that spectacular? So would you be interested in learning a little bit about how the butterflies migrate these thousands of miles?
Absolutely. I'm interested in.
There are about 12 species of butterflies that actually migrate these thousands of miles. And they take advantage of thermals, those pockets of rising warm air and tailwinds. They glide on southwesterly wind currents, taking advantage of team flying to increase efficiency. Usually there are 3 to a group, and it's estimated that they fly, or let's call it glide, at 30 miles an hour.
Oh,
So it's a special set of skills for an animal that only weighs less than a dollar bill to do.
amazing.
Would you be interested in learning a little bit about how Yule Gibbons is connected to milkweed?
Who's Yule Gibbons?
He wrote the book Stalking the Wild Asparagus in 1962. He was all about eating anything that was wild.
Yeah, I'd like to know that actually.
So he was able to boil off the milkweed latex. The poison is cardinalide. That's the particular steroid that makes it unpalatable and often fatal to some. But he tricked his wife and son into believing it was asparagus, and they ate it, and they survived.
Wow.
So now the cardinalide is also used for congestive heart failure and as anti-cancer medication.
We know how beautiful they are when we see them, but when you first see them, when they're nesting in the trees, you can't see them. You'll think they're all dead leaves. And they'll sit just like that, perch just like that, until the temperature gets 55 degrees. And at that moment, all of them will let loose from the tree and begin their flying.
Amazing.
It is. It's just like, oh my gosh. And we all look, it's not 55 degrees yet. So what's wonderful for me for being part of this is that the enthusiasm of the families who willing to do this in their own garden and bring their own children. And when we're through with the garden, it'll have beautiful places where it will explain to you what's going on and what the pollinators are. And we're in the process of putting up a fence to keep the deer away from the beautiful flowers. And all in all, it's a great gift to the community, the Pollinator Garden, and the butterflies.
Well, you may not know this about me, but I'm a professional gardener. And I've been building butterfly gardens for years.
Well, we should be at your
So
house.
I liked the list of plants that she named off were right up my alley.
I hope you throw that out every day, just a plant here or there, something you could do for your garden, listeners.
Oh yeah, well the Buddleias and the salvias are fantastic for butterflies, and quite a few trees too. You know, butterflies.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The list goes on.
You have to talk into there.
Salvias and sages and asters and parsley and dill, and on it goes. And so what's good for the monarchs is, everyone,
Good for everyone.
good for all the pollinators. Thank you for that. I don't know how we are on time, but I can share one more fact that might be of interest to your listeners.
One quick fact, and we're going to cut to the top of the hour.
All right, this is for the artists out there who may regard Vincent van Gogh in a special light. He was treated for epilepsy with foxglove. It's another plant that has digitalis in it. And so he was served digitalis tea, for which, like milkweed, contains the cardinalides. It causes the patient to have yellow vision and to see halos around bright objects. So think of the yellow in Van Gogh's paintings and of his painting The Starry Night, for example.
Oh, I know that meaning.
It was thought that at that time he was suffering from cardinalide intoxication. But these cardinalides were used for treating heart ailments as far back as ancient Egypt and Rome. So could I just leave your listeners with one more thought? I think I'm out of time.
And make sure at the end of that thought to include where the garden is and how to find you.
Okay. So something to think about. This is by John Muir. When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. So we're located at 252 West Spain Street, behind the Congregational Church, Shir Shalom, Sonoma. Thank you so much. Susan?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Susan,